My name is Danielle. I am 22 years old. I am a senior at Brandeis University. I am a neuroscience major. I hope to go to medical school within the next few years, and I hope to actually be an oncologist. And then I guess a little bit about my dad. He was and still is the most important person in my life. He was my biggest hero and my absolute biggest role model, and the most incredible, doting, loving father, pretty much, in my opinion, to ever exist. I just feel so fortunate to have had him for close to 20 years in my life. So I guess I will start by talking about his disease now. So he was diagnosed with lung cancer on July 28th, 2011. And I remember this day. I was at the gym before I had come home, and we found out. And so I was at the gym. I remember being in a fantastic mood. I had about a month before I was leaving, and I was very, very excited to go start my independent life, start my school. So life was really, really good. And I remember coming home, and I was upstairs, and my mother sort of shouted out, family meeting, come downstairs. And I remember thinking that this was somewhat odd, especially specifically because she said, come into the library, which is not a room that we frequented. The kitchen was sort of the hearth of our home, and where we often spent family time. So I remember sort of instantly feeling uncomfortable and confused and sort of slightly just off, I suppose. So me and my older brother and my younger sister, and so we all sat down, and there was sort of a moment of silence before my mother actually spoke, and she was the one to let us know. And she said, guys, Daddy is sick. Those were the first words. And so in that moment, I knew. I knew, I think, before either of my siblings had any sort of concept of what that entailed. But because I'd always been interested in oncology, and because of I guess how well I knew my dad, because we were very, very close, and just the terminology, just saying he was sick, I just knew. So I instantly erupted into tears, sort of hysterical wailing, to be honest. And my brother reacted very differently, and he started crying and asking all sorts of questions. What's going on? What is it? Just all sorts of questions, just pestering, and that my parents and my sister just sat quietly on my other side and hadn't reacted yet. So it was quite the mess, and I couldn't cope with it. I couldn't handle it. My mother started to speak more, and she tried to calm us a little bit, and then she said, he has cancer. And then at that point, I just went over a cliff, completely lost it, and was at the point of no return, and there was no way I was calming down. To the point that I ran out of the room, and there was a sort of tragic moment in which my dad actually called me over. He said, hey Dee Dee, which is my nickname within my family, and he said, can I have a hug? And so I was hysterical and went over to give him a hug before I kind of continued to then run out of the room. I felt like I couldn't breathe, and I sort of needed to get outside. So I actually went out of my house and walked up the street. So I know that my parents were just so devastated that this was something completely out of their control, that they couldn't protect us from this horrible reality. So we didn't say much, and I eventually got picked up and went to my best friend's house, and we just sort of sat. We didn't really say much, but it was nice to be with someone who was in the same place as me, and we just sat with each other and sort of consoled each other with our presence. I cried and she cried, and and then I went home later that night, and that was the beginning. That was the beginning of a full year exactly to the date, because he passed away on July 28th, 2012. That was the beginning of this journey. And so pretty soon after, my dad started treatment, and I was sort of the manic, overbearing child type. So I would constantly text him and constantly call him, and just, I guess sometimes I just wanted to confirm that he was still there. And so I kind of continued to do that. And I think I immediately panicked and said, I am not going to college. And I said, I'm gonna be here. I can't. I said, I can't. And my mom and dad looked at me and they said, oh no, you are going to school and you are going to live your life. They said, you have your whole life ahead of you. And that is something that each of them, both together and individually, repeated to me and my siblings. They said, you have your whole life ahead of you. And that was hard for me to grasp at first, I think, but it's true. My dad's cancer can't be the defining thing for me, and so you do have to keep going. So I went to school, and that was hard. And it was hard because I was scared about not being present for everything, because I was so sort of trying to be controlling. And I think in order to sort of comfort me, my dad actually let me go to his first chemotherapy treatment with him, and it was just the two of us. And it wasn't bad. I actually have a picture of it, of him sitting in the chair and looking perfectly comfortable, and you know, he still looked like himself, and I found myself sort of constantly looking at him as if I expected to see the cancer or its effects. But he looked like my dad. He looked like the 51-year-old ice hockey playing, stamp collecting, guitar loving dad that I'd always known. So things felt okay. I felt sad and scared, but he was still there, and he was fighting, and so that's what you have to keep in mind, right? You have to sort of keep in mind that they're still with you, and that everyone's trying. But things continued. He went back home, and life went on. And I talked to him frequently, and I texted him constantly, and he was quite annoyed with me, to be honest. I texted him saying, I love you, and he's like, I love you too, go do normal college things, stop texting your dad. And so I went, I think the first and most shocking and most difficult moment was returning home for December break, because my father wasn't doing well. But he wasn't doing well not because of his disease, but because of his treatment. And I think that that's something that's often hard for people to grasp, which is that the treatment within cancer is toxic. It's toxic to the body, and so people get very sick and very ill. And so it's hard to see someone sick and ill who has cancer and not associate with the cancer, and instead understand that it's because of the treatment. And that was the first of many times to come that I would see him in the hospital and see him in less than stellar condition. And so life went on, and eventually he finished the treatment in January, and then he went back to work in February, and then he was my dad again. And so the idea is, with cancer, is that when you finish your course of treatment and you're done, you have to return back to life, and you have to keep going, and you have to act as though it is cured. And that was pretty easy for me to adopt, because I so desperately wanted him to be cured, and I so desperately assumed that he was going to cure himself, and he was going to be cured from the beginning, because you cling to hope. It's what gets you by. It's the fact that you know that there is hope and that there is a chance. So I did. He was just my dad again. He went back to work, and he was a doctor again, and he was back to the normal way of things, and he was the doctor, and he saw his patients, and he was no longer my dad, the patient. The day after my brother's graduation, one of the screws in my bracelet had come loose. And my parents were furious with me, and I was so upset. I was so upset because I had no idea, and it was a complete accident. How I didn't even know how it had happened, and then we found the screw, and it wasn't. And we were in the car, and it was on the seat, but my parents had gotten so upset, so exaggeratedly upset, which was so unlike them. And there were other little things, like at the dinner the previous night, that had, I made a comment about the future at the dinner. I don't remember exactly what, but I talked about something that was sort of in the distant future. And my parents seemed so troubled. And lo and behold, my father's cancer had come back, and they had known for a couple of weeks, and they hadn't told us because they wanted us to all be together, and they also wanted to have Andrew's graduation be about him and not about, not sort of tarnished by the recurrence of my dad's cancer. And so I know, and I knew, that if his lung cancer came back, that he was going to die. And so that was a very difficult, almost even more difficult than the first time, because there was very little left to cling to. And so now I really felt my whole world collapsing and shifting and spiraling out of control. And so I had a lot of trouble now adjusting to this knowledge of the future. And you know, of course, you know that your parents are not going to be around forever, but it's hard to know that they're going to be leaving you sooner than you'd like. And so I sort of isolated myself a lot. I found it very, very trying and difficult to speak to anyone because people want so badly to comfort you, and they want so badly to sort of present some small piece of hope. So when I went to college and I was able to tell people that my dad had cancer, everybody was like, well, you know, there are treatments, people are cured. But now if I tell people that my dad is dying, what do they say? And what do I say? And there's nothing to say. And I couldn't really handle having conversations because you can see in somebody else's eyes that they know. So it's hard to imagine how you can ever adjust it to something like this, but you really do. It became our new normal. I would frequently go to work, get off of work, and then me and my sister would drive to the hospital. And that became somewhat normal because he would be in the hospital for a few days every once in a while, and that was just normal. And it was strange. It was a strange time. And it was hard. It was hard watching him because when someone has cancer and you know that they're dying from it, you're not aware or prepared for how they might die. So I never really considered how bad it could possibly get before he actually passed. And so it was something I was completely unprepared for. And so as his health really declined, it's hard to see a parent who cares for you and who is the provider become sort of childlike and helpless and need assistance, and it's hard because you know that devastates them in every way possible and goes against every parental bone in their body. And so it was a really tough transition to see my father need assistance and need help from me. But but it was also a time in which my family really came together, in which we tried to make the best out of even the most bleak situations, in which we found ways to laugh during the darkest times. And that was a huge thing. Laughter was never missing from my family. Never. Not even on the day of the funeral did we ever stop laughing. And that got me by, because either you laugh or you cry. And so we laughed. We laughed all the way through. And so his health declined, and honest to God, the worst days were the last days, because my dad had his cancer had metastasized to his brain, and so I wasn't prepared to lose him before I lost him, and that's what happened. His mental capacity was severely diminished. And it was sort of this terrifying husk of someone that I knew was the most brilliant guy. And so my mom did her best to protect us. In fact, she did not let us see him the first day. And then she limited our time to see him, because she just didn't want us sitting there. And I'm so grateful, because nothing good can come of just languishing in that situation. And so we saw him, and it was bizarre, but he was still able to, he blew us kisses. And I think one of the nicest things, and one of the nicest memories I have from those days, and one of the probably the only nice memory is that another irony. My mom's birthday was coming up, and it just, what a horrible, terrible timing. But and right before he passed. But I remember that we were going out, me and my siblings, we went out to get my mom birthday cards. And I picked one up for my dad. And my siblings were skeptical, and rightfully so. But when we went to the hospital on her birthday on the 27th of July, and he was awake, but he wasn't there, and he wasn't really aware. And I said, Dad, today is Mom's birthday. Will you sign this card? And so he did, in the best way he could. He took the pen and he scribbled. But it was a really nice thing to give to my mom. And the hospital people were so wonderful, and they actually they ordered flowers for her from him. And yeah. So so that was the day. My mother's birthday was the day before he passed. And at this point, all of us were exhausted. My family was, we were at our lowest point. There was really nothing left to hope for, other than his passing. And so it was almost important that all of this happened, because we were at this point just hoping that he would pass, and peacefully as possible, and that his fight could end, because he fought. My dad fought with such strength, and he really tried everything possible to be able to remain with his family. And there are no doubts in my mind that he did everything within his control to get an extra day, an extra hour. And then the next morning, my mom came in and woke me up at I think she woke me up first at 5:36 in the morning. And she sort of burst into my room and said, get out of bed, get dressed, we're going to the hospital. And so I did. You know, you're sort of on autopilot in these moments, and you have no idea what's going on, and your mind is running, and you're throwing on clothes. And so my mom left first because she wanted to get there first. And so my sister and my brother and my sister's boyfriend at the time drove us. And we sat silently in the car for a while, and none of us said anything. And I'm not sure what we were expecting, but we entered the hospital, and we went to the floor, and at this point, honestly, we knew where we were going. We were so used to being in the hospital setting that just autopilot, it just took over, and we got to the hall, and we walked towards his room, and my mom was standing outside, and there were people gathered sort of near her, clustered in. And she shook her head, and she was crying, and throughout this whole process, I never saw my mother cry. And so we knew that he was gone. And so once again, I collapsed on the floor, crying hysterically in the cancer ward. And my sister again was quiet and to herself, and my brother was crying. And so it was funny because it was this mirroring of when we found out. And it just goes to show that not only were all of us reacting different in the beginning and then handling it different throughout the whole process, but we handled the entire thing from beginning to end, and then even afterwards very, very differently. But it was okay. And I guess I in that moment, when I thought about my dad dying, I sort of had this irrational thought that the world could not possibly exist without him, and so I was sort of waiting for him to go, and I sort of thought that I would just poof, and I didn't, because you don't, because that doesn't just happen, and I think we all felt tremendous relief too, because that was not how my father lived his life. He was very active, and he had a very full life, and he filled it with things that he loved. And him being in a hospital with such diminished mobility and freedom, it was not how we ever wanted to see him. And I remember my mom told me, she said, I promise you that this is not how you will remember him. You will not remember him because in the end he did not even look like my dad anymore. He had no hair anymore. And he looked quite good bald when he first had it shaved, and so he had no hair anymore, and he was on steroids, so he was all puffed up, and you could actually, because his cancer had spread to his neck and brain, you could actually physically see the tumors, and so kind of protruding it, and so he didn't even look like himself. So it was almost even hard to identify that my dad was gone, because the person in front of me didn't resemble who I knew to be my father. So at first I didn't want to go into the room because my mom asked if we wanted to say our goodbyes, and at first I was very uncomfortable with the idea, but she kind of pushed me to, and I'm very glad. And I didn't. It was strange, but I sat for a little while, and I didn't touch him. I didn't really go near him too much. I kissed the top of his head, but I talked. I sat in the room, and I talked out loud and just had a conversation with him. And then we went home, and it was funny because we went home and everyone sat down, and all of us sat and we said, now what? Because we had spent the past months in the new normal, in our new normal of constantly shuttling back and forth between hospital and home, and we always had something to do. There was always something to do, to be done, to take care of it. And now there was nothing. And so it was this strange, uncomfortable moment of sitting there feeling like, why aren't we going to the hospital right now? Or why aren't we there? And that was something I also wasn't prepared for, which was the aftermath of the life that I had known before he was sick was gone. And the life I had known while he was sick was gone. And now I didn't have anything. Both lives were over. And so it was strange. It was really strange to try and think about what I was going to do. But things sort of over the next couple of weeks started to settle, and of course I was going back to college. And just like before, there was no way I was not going back to school. And I'm so grateful for it, because in all honesty, I needed distractions, and I needed things to do. I needed classes to attend. I needed friends being around. I needed that because you can't sit around all day and think about it, because it does no good. And you will think about it whether you like it or not. And eventually I went back to school. And that was hard. And it was hard to return to school because people are seeing me for the first time, and everybody knows. And so it's sort of all at once, because everybody is seeing me, because I go to a very small school, and so you're sort of overwhelmed with people coming over to you, and you get that look of pity on their face, and that's really hard, because my family had a lot of pride, and so it's hard to have people feel sorry for you when that's not particularly comforting, but of course it's natural. And I used to really believe that I always say this, that there's really no right thing to say, because there really isn't anything that you can say that's going to take away the pain and the sadness. But there are definitely wrong things to say. And so while it also angered me that some people just said the wrong things and did the wrong things, it was also sort of funny in this horrible ironic way, because you just think, what is wrong with you? And so it was entertaining, I suppose, to say the least. And I had really great friends, and I had some not so great friends. And this whole process through his entire illness is a lot of people were let go, and a lot of people came in. And through it, I have found some of the most kind, considerate, caring, selfless people. And at first, I cried all the time. I like to cry privately, so I would have these moments where I'd feel it coming, and I would sort of immediately jump up and run back to my room, sort of just hoping and praying that I would get there before I sort of broke. But time, I wouldn't say time heals, because I just don't think there is enough time. I don't think I have enough time on this earth to ever get over the loss of my dad. I just don't think there would ever be enough time. But time helps. And so I started to move on, and it started to become easier to do normal daily life activities. And so I started crying less, and as the months went by, instead of crying every day, I was crying every other day, and instead of crying every other day, I was crying 2 times a week, and then instead of crying every 2 times a week, I was crying once a week. And now I still cry, and it's been 2.5 years since his passing, and I don't think I ever will not cry, but it's few and far between now. And you just have to let yourself be, and I did. I just let myself do whatever sort of came, and so whenever I wanted to cry, I cried. Whenever I wanted to find someone to talk to about it, I did. And I started to see somebody, which was very helpful for me, and I thought that was very useful for me. And I know other people find that useful, and some people don't. And you do what helps you get by. And I think that first year is one of the hardest, because it's the first holidays, it's the first birthdays, that you just can't help but get set off. And so it was hard, but we did what we did. We did the same holidays that we always did, and we even set an extra setting for him, I think, and we really tried to come together as a family and just reminisce about all of the happy times. And the best part about it is slowly but surely, I stopped thinking about my dad, the cancer patient, and my dad is sickly and my dad is debilitated, and I thought of my dad as my dad again. And it was so nice, and it was so relieving to put him back at the place where he belonged in my mind, and in the state that he was meant to be in my mind. And that's where I am now, is that when I talk about my dad, it's rarely the sad things anymore, and it's usually just all of the wonderful stories and all of the wonderful things that we did together. And it's hard because you start to forget, and that's not an easy process, and you beat yourself up a lot about it on the inside because you think to yourself, how could I not have cataloged every single detail of everything, every facial expression, every term he used, his little idiosyncrasies, everything. How could I, because while it's happening and while they're sick and while they're dying, you're trying so hard to grab onto every moment, every experience, and you're thinking, how did I let those go? And the truth is you didn't. You never did, and you never will. That just can't go away when someone is so important to you. Those don't go away, and those little things are not what have the most importance or meaning. Everything I have from my dad and everything I remember of him as the person that he was, and the wonderful physician that he was, and the wonderful human being that he was, all of those things that he taught me about how to be a good person, that those are still here and still within me, and those were what what composed him as a person. Just watching my siblings go through it, I realized, and my mother, people are different, and people are unique, and people cope in different ways, and you should never judge anyone coping in any way. I think that at some point, whenever you're comfortable, it's important to talk about it. And for some people that may not be for many, many years. And for some people that may be with a friend or a family member, or professional, or anywhere really. But I think that it can be very, very therapeutic and cathartic to let that out and into the world, because it's a lot to keep inside, and it's a lot to keep bottled up. So I think that at some point everybody should. And that's really all I have to say.